Hello everyone, thanks for coming this afternoon to our Curator's Talk with Carol Taylor-Kearney. She put together this show for us, and we're very grateful for that. We have one of the artists with us, Susan Stefanski, and Carol will talk about the other work and engage Susan and talk about how she put it together. I also want to mention that Carol reviews every show that we put on in a very thoughtful way in this space and our collective gallery. We're very grateful for that. She does a great job. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So let's give a warm welcome to Carol and Susan.
Hello, and thank you for being here. As Michael had said, I am the curator of Plein Air here at Cerulean Arts at 1355 Ridge Avenue in Philadelphia, just in case you didn't know. A curator is basically an organizer and the originator of the idea. And the idea that I had came from basically the landscape and how different artists deal with the landscape. But before I get started in all that, there are a lot of people for me to thank, because none of this happens just through one person. There are a lot of helpers, a lot of supporters. So the first people, of course, I want to thank are the person I'm looking at, Tina, and Michael, for Cerulean Arts. Not just for the venue, which is wonderful, but they do a marvelous job. They make the postcard, they post it online, they have the website and maintain it, they put out the PR to people. They're the people who are here to explain it day to day, who sell the work and tell the artists. So they bring together an awful lot that's going on. And Cerulean Arts isn't just this gallery, it's this gallery and a shop that also carries the work of fine art crafters. And not to be limited, they also present workshops so that if you're interested in the arts or you want to know more about making art, there are artists who come in here to explain their work and to show you how can I do this. And finally, they have gone even beyond this in the last 2 years to open Cerulean Arts Collective, which is next door. And I am encouraging everyone who's here to get themselves over to see Cerulean Arts Collective. 5 individual solo shows going on simultaneously with an opening that will be happening later today. So make sure that you go over and celebrate. Now, the next group of people that, of course, I have to thank are in some ways surrounding me, and that's the artists. Without them, there would be no exhibition. I can have all the ideas I want in my head, but without them, there's no exhibition. And to exhibit your work as an artist is courageous, because we make it by ourselves in our studio. We sit there with our ideas and we create, and all these things come together, and we could keep it at that, kind of like singing an opera in the shower, but we decide to go out and put it out in the world, and to have that audience come back and forth. That makes the art a conversation, and that is important to artists, and that is important to the artwork. It becomes lively on its own. And speaking about artists, I have another artist, I'm looking around for her, who I have to thank. Michael mentioned What's Art blog, and I wasn't going to write a blog all on my own about my own show. So Ruth Wolf, who's a wonderful writer and has written at least 3 or 4 previous blogs that are on What's Art blog, and I can only encourage you to read them, www.whatsartblog.com. She wrote an incredible essay with pictures all about this show. Of course, after that, there are the people who are surrounding me, and some of the people who were there at the opening, And that's the family and friends of the artists who are in the show. The opening was quite lively, and which is nice. But the thing is to thank the people who are our first sponsors, our first patrons, the people who keep us going, even when we're going like, I don't know if I can do this. The people who are there for us day in and day out in our creative work and come and support us no matter what. For myself, my own family has been there to not only be that voice, but move my art, help me put my art together. I don't keep anything simple. And do an incredible amount of body physical work that is part of making things. So I want to thank them for that. And I especially have to point out my husband, Joan, who has been, I've been told, and this is true, is the most tolerant man in the world. Because he puts up with me and all the strange ideas I might come up with. So, with that, I would like to move on to some fortunate and unfortunate news. I'm going to start with the unfortunate, and that is that some of the artists, and I'm going to go through their names since I didn't say them before, Ellen Abraham, Melissa Rubin, Roni Sherman Ramos, and Joan Walton couldn't be here today. Unfortunately, they are away. But, and here's the sunny side, fortunately, we have Susan Stefanski with us. Who are going to tell us some words about her art. Afterwards, I'll come back and tell you about the other artists who are included here. So, once again, warm welcome, Susan Stefanski.
Thank you, Carol, for inviting me, and Tina and Michael. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to show my work with such wonderful artists. And Carol, your work's amazing too, very creative. So I'll start by telling a little bit how I got into it. I never picked up a pen or drew, nothing, before I was 47 years old. I was the secretary at Villanova, and I could take class for free. And I thought, haven't done a term paper in 30 years. I think I'll try a drawing class or painting class or something. And oh man, did I get smitten. I just fell in love with it, and my teacher was so encouraging, and so I took every class I could at Villanova, Mainline Art Center, Wayne Art Center, just for years, just took classes. And one year though, I decided I really can't do watercolor until I know how to draw. I couldn't draw, so I did a whole year of drawing. I drew morning, noon, night, my lunch hour, weekends. I was consumed and just loved it. And it was such a joyful process. And all my paintings fall under the umbrella of God's gifts. And I love the landscape, but I love doing still lifes. I love children at play. I mean, I really had a hard time narrowing it down. So after a couple of years painting, I felt called to do this full time, and decided that I would quit my job at Villanova. Not that I didn't love the people or love what I was doing, I did, but I felt called to get moving and do this full time. So, which let me go outside during the day. I wasn't working 9 to 5 anymore, so I could paint outside, and wow, was that just so freeing and eye-opening, and you know, the whole environment became part of the painting, and I just loved it. I love being outside. And there's some challenges with painting outside. A couple of things. I was talking to Michael a few weeks ago about some of my challenges was when a dog happily bounded up and landed on my canvas, wiped everything out, and I was so worried about the poor animal's paws, and I'm like, no cobalts, no cadmiums on the dogs. It was mostly titanium white, got it cleaned up. felt better about that, and off he went, and here I am with a runny mess, and I was like, So I painted that sucker so fast. Got it all back in, and it looked great, because I thought I should get that dog to like jump on my stuff all the time. So that was good. A couple ahas I've learned: don't sit on logs while you're painting. Come up with a lot of ticks. Don't lay your coat on the ground. Come up with a lot of ticks. Keep an umbrella over you, whether you need it or not. Keeps ticks off. So I've had problems with ticks. Shower right away when you get home, so they're not embedded in your neck or wherever. So I've gotten better at that. There actually is a place where you can send your clothing away and have it treated so that you don't have ticks all over you. But I spray the area. I hate to do this, but I do spray the area that I'm going to stand and then get going, and I just stay in a spot. Another thing I learned, my painting that's here called Berries, that is, I was painting that and had put my bag down on the ground, and it was the day after a storm, and it got very hot that day. It got warm. So my bag's down, I'm painting away, very interested in what I'm doing, not noticing that the post and rail fence, everything melted off of it into my bag. So then I had to dump a big puddle of water out of my bag. So I've learned a lot of things, what not to do while you're out painting. I've done nocturnes where you paint at night, which is a challenge and a lot of fun. I've been involved in a lot of invitational and a lot of jury shows, and I do a lot of plein air competitions that allow me to paint places I wouldn't ordinarily have an opportunity, like Jamie Wyeth's farm, and just beautiful places. And it's just such a joy to be out there. And I'll paint a painting and soften it, and then I go back in with thicker paint or a palette knife, and I end up trying to guide the viewer through the painting. I feel tremendous sense of joy and serenity and peace when I'm outside and painting, and I just feel very close to God. I feel blessed and lucky to be allowed to do what I love to do, to have some good health, that I can continue to do what I'm doing. So, I try and give him a shout out and say thank you. Thanks to God. So I feel very blessed, and all of these things become part of the painting while you're out there. The bugs, the bees, invariably I have dropped things flat after I thought I had a really good piece, flat on the ground. So I've learned, pick it up, don't touch it. Just leave it alone. When it dries, all the debris you can just sort of brush off, and it's almost good as new. Just leave it alone. So I've learned a lot of things from other artists, from friends, family. So grateful for my family who supports me. My husband schleps my work, helps me all the time, is very encouraging when I get a little frustrated with myself. So I don't know, I think the other thing I guess I could say about my paintings is I have all the colors, all the complements are in all my paintings, even though you might look and they look green or they might look predominantly a certain color, all the colors are in there. So if there's blue, there's going to be orange. If there's red, or green, a lot of my paintings are green, there's red in there. Same with purple and yellow, like they're all in there. So I think they hold together pretty well. And I just have to keep myself held together and keep doing this. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
All right,
I'm going
back
to take
the other gang.
I'm going to take your spot, and I'm going to begin by saying where Plein Air came from. Plein Air is a homophone. That is 3 words that sound exactly alike, spelled completely different, and have tremendously different meanings. But they all fit in, as I said earlier, to the landscape. And you can get the idea that I like words and I'm a storyteller if you look at my piece, which is behind the cash register. And my piece is called Fly, Swim, Duck. And you'll notice on it that it's a single scene, but told in 4 different panes. And there are words to it. It's not only the title, Fly, Swim, Duck, but it also has swan, feathers, duck, twice, that have to do with what the subject matter is. And when you go and you start to put it together, it's all a story, which is what I like. I like to tell stories with words, I like to tell stories with pictures, and I like to tell stories through exhibitions. So the exhibition here is my version of another story, a story of how these artists go and interact with their worlds, mostly their natural worlds, and bring it back to the rest of us through their artwork. So, starting with my first artist, I should say, I'm going to talk about why I chose specifically Susan at the very end. But with the first artist here, who's a Plein Air Artist, E-I-N, that's Ellen Abraham. And Ellen Abraham is responsible for taqueria here. And taqueria, as you can see, is a crowded space. And it appears to be done with like some kind of pen, with a marker. And that's what's remarkable about Ellen. She does her work with whatever is at hand. A piece of paper. Sometimes she has a sketchbook, sometimes not. If you're with her, it might be a placemat, it might be something she pulls out of her pocketbook. You might be at a meeting and it's everything that's going to be done at the meeting. And you always are watching her hand move, watching her hand move. Before you know it, you have this whole little world set up. And it's really interesting, the composition way that she has set up this world. We actually kind of get blocked in by these blues. At the same time, she's giving us so much information. Window, outside, every brick in the wall, there's a light up there. Here are all the people, and we see a little bit of their personalities, and yet there's this area right here. And we know that's where Ellen was sitting and looking. And what was the thing that drew Ellen into this? Well, look at this animated face surrounded by red. And we know that's what Ellen first started with. There's where she started. And she gives us this picture of movement. You can practically hear the noise from this. Another piece that I loved of Ellen's, which is quite different, and I'm going to interrupt my mother here, make the old lady move, is Waiting Room. And in Waiting Room, Ellen does something similar. You can just...
No, that's okay, I can see.
Waiting Room, you can see, you know it's a waiting room, there's pamphlets, there's magazine, you look at the furnishings and it's like, yeah, it looks like every doctor's office I've ever had to be in. And there's this woman who's sitting there, who's attached actually to the piece, to the drawing, by her shadow that's in the back. And she's settled into that chair. We can really fit that she's fitting into that space. And then we look and we see her eyes are downcast, her body looks relaxed, except for that arm and that fist that's planted against her face. And all the tension that is in that room is actually just in that arm and in that fist, planted to her face. And we know exactly how she's feeling. She's either sitting there waiting for somebody to come out and get her, or she's waiting to hear about somebody, probably someone she loves, who's back there and not with her. So you see how Ellen creates the mood of the piece, just with very simple line and color and simple instruments. And here's what Ellen had to say about herself. I'm a former social studies teacher who is still very interested in social studies as a subject to my art. The satire and cartoon imagery of my youthful artwork evolved as I became familiar with German Expressionism and American social realism. The sketches of people I do almost daily, so check out her My Daily Sketch on Facebook and American Sketch on Facebook, provide constant fodder for her art. My goal is to create art that is sown from the depths of comic outrageousness, satirical observation, and a mild misanthropy. If Matisse had a sun in his belly, I have a banana peel permanently affixed to my shoe. I have thousands of sketches I've done over the years, and I go out on mingle and hunt days in hopes of finding interesting subject matter, mostly in restaurants, bars, trains, buses, the beach, or anywhere else I may be. These sketches are then scanned into a computer, which I can later employ to create larger complex works in paintings, drawings, transfer prints, cyanotypes, and monoprints. And one of these is down here, and you can see individual characters that come together to fit the theme. One sketch outside my studio can develop into myriad possibilities inside my studio. Now, as far as Susan's work goes, because she too is a plein air artist, more in the traditional sense of going outside, I am going to start with For the Birds. You can see here that she's taken her brush, and there's a blue sky and this brushwork that is going across, and we see the tilt of the lines that make up the grasses. And if we look even closer, these posts for the birdhouses, they're not straight, they're a little akimbo too. They're tilted, all within the same direction. So through her skies, through the way she makes her skies, she's giving us atmosphere and the change of condition that she is having as she's out here in this field painting this. And I even find that when I stand there and look at it, I end up on one foot kind of looking and tilting right along with all the movement in the painting. I love her skies. They, to me, are very rich and full of narrative in and of themselves. And the other piece that you can see this in is one that Susan said herself, which is called Red Berries Waterloo. And she already explained the condition. And you can look at that sky and see it is that crystalline sky that we get right after a squall, right after a big snowstorm. But there's more to it, because as we move back to the horizon line, we also get this gray. So we get the blue crystalline sky that we know means a warm sun, and we have the cold earth, and then we have the frost. As the sun hits the snow and the day moves on, that moves up, and we know will become those cumulus clouds that we'll see later. And we can literally feel the cool and the cold and the crystals that Susan was feeling as she's outside. The next artist I'm going to talk to, actually the next two artists, are what I call Plein Air Artists. That's P-L-A-I-N. And plain can be a grasslands, usually flat, lots of grass, which is interesting because it looks flat, but as you walk out into it, you feel that it's not flat at all. It has a lot of bumps and ridges. But plain also means basic and direct. And as a plein air artist, I have chosen Roni Sherman Ramos as one of the artists because she starts off often in plein air, outside, though sometimes not, and then takes what she has recorded into her studio and works it over again and again and again, so that you come up with something like Untitled number 4. And what I find really interesting about this is in working it over and over and over again, you can see what a rule breaker Roni truly is. Because in composition, we're taught that warm, bright, large, and light shapes come forward. And cool, dull, defined, edged shapes go back. I should say dull too. Those go back. And Roni has gone and worked into this to a point where you are not quite sure about figure ground, because like some things that are very defined, they seem to be behind something else that is very undefined. And when I first looked at this, it reminded me of looking down into a field from an airplane window, and I have to look through clouds in order to see this. But as I get close, I can also see where she has like that plane of grass made surfaces uneven, so that I get a sense of these floating colors, these worn down parts, all coming to a kind of evenness that tells me this is my surface, this is my picture plane. Another artist who is a plein air artist, as I said, one more picture of Roni. Oh, I'm sorry, I should read for you what Roni had to say about her own work. For me, painting is both a physical and an emotional act. Just as mind and body interact, so do my internal and external worlds exert influence on the images I produce. Using color, light, shadows, forms, and shapes, I am channeling images. Whatever comes of that and goes onto the canvas has come through me rather than of me. When viewing my work, people often ask me for information of what to look for. I gave an exhibition entitled Stop Making Sense, which I borrowed from the Talking Heads of 1984 album. And that's actually what my response usually is. My hope is that viewers will react to the work in their own ways. That is, refrain from descriptive titles. The urban environment in which I live provides me with a constant source of visual material to work with. I see compositions in the everyday: sidewalks, walls, hard edges of brick, concrete, and machine glass. I'm drawn to imperfections and variations of these forms. Through the action of layering, I sand, scrape, and gouge, and reveal the undertones. Each of my paintings is a palette set. It's an excavation into its own history. The other plein air artist, as I had said, is Melissa Rubin. Melissa's work is in cold wax and encaustic. And you can see some of them here, but I might move you to one of the others that, further back, that are in better light. So this one's Lighthouse. And working in cold wax and encaustic gives you a very different surface. Actually, the surface feels rather smooth, but velvety. It sometimes reminds me of looking through still water at something. And when you do this, you can often see the shapes, but you also get this kind of luminosity to it that something might not necessarily have. Think about it. You see a pebble in the bottom of a stream, and you pick up that pebble, and as it still has water on it, you can see all the colors in it. But as it dries, the colors kind of disappear. And that is a kind of surface quality that happens in Melissa's work. It brings up all the colors, and yet there's a quality that at any minute they might disappear from us. In this piece in particular, Lighthouse, we have two triangles, one of which is shining directly up, and it's glossy, it's shiny. The other one, which is still yellow, is shining down. It seems to be opening into a field that includes blues and browns, and these browns even take on kind of a feeling of ground. And if I look close, I can see that once again, things have been scraped, and there's little material things in this. And when I put that all together, this kind of rugged sky, that though light does not necessarily give me the time of day, but more the atmosphere. It gives me a shine, that something's shining at me and illuminating the ground and the water. And this bottom plane that changes color and has a materiality about it that I often see when I'm at the seashore. And here is what Melissa had to say about her own work. My materials, my medium, function as my vocabulary of expression. It also stands in as proxy to the emotional states of mind. My artwork is a manifestation of my interaction with my environment and the effects that environment may have on my outer and inner worlds. Currently, my studio is in Rockaway Beach in New York City, so the work reflects this urban ocean environment and draws inspiration from the light and tones of the open sky, beach, and water. The surfaces create a feeling of place, yet also are a conduit through which light can emanate and radiate. The pieces of Plein Air incorporate the intensity of oil paints, the earthiness of powdered pigments, and the subtle glimmer of various metal leaf. Cold wax medium, being inherently translucent, lends luminosity and enables me to layer you on top of you, rubbing, scraping, and revealing color and texture below the surface. It is an excavation of the heart and mind, and I choose materials that help to facilitate the sense of mystery and of light. I think of my pieces as places to come to rest, both physically and emotionally, allowing the viewer a moment to reflect, looking outward as well as inward. And finally, I have my Plein Air Artists. That's P-L-A-N-E, and that is Joan Walton. And Plein here, if you know anything about geometry, and we all have to study it, to different effects for each of us, we have a point, a line, a plane. And Joan works in what I like to call both 3 and 4D. D stands for dimensions, and D is descriptive of the kind of planes that there can be. In 3-dimensional artwork and planes, we have length, width, and depth, which obviously this piece has. In 4-dimensional planes, we have length, width, depth, and time. So how is it that I can claim that these are 4-dimensional pieces? And part of that comes from the way that she handles her surfaces. This outer surface is dull and looks aged. It's even colored in a way that reminds me of seashells that have been through a lot, or flowers as they're ready to drop off the stem. But the inside is shiny. And both of these surfaces invite touch. We want to touch them, and we especially want to touch that edge. And what does that edge represent? The place where that outer, which is part of the same piece, and that inner come together. And what has happened to make perhaps that inner into that outer, or that outer into that inner? And the only thing I can think of is time. Perhaps it was all like this to begin with, and eventually it became like this. Or perhaps it was all like this to begin with, and got worn down and became that. So when I look at her pieces, I see time in that way. The other way I see time is that they're all made up of different sections. There's this section, and this section, and this section. I think the piece that best talks about sections is this one. You can see the rosette that got formed originally, and then more got put on, and that forms the next layer, and then more got put on, and that forms the next layer. So before you know it, you have all these working together into one major piece, which of course takes an awful lot of time. So here is what Joan had to say about her own work. I think of my ceramics as a conversation that will be overheard by a careful observer. I will say that sentence again, as I was not a careful observer. I think of my ceramics as a conversation that will be overheard by a careful observer. Their designs are inspired by the small treasures which are most often overlooked, but which give me great joy. Chips of bark, split seeds, broken pods, fragments of shells and weathered bones that are hidden in plain sight. I gather them on walks. I'm engaged by their construction and wearing away. I like to feel their rough edges and smooth inside. They make me think about ever-changing life, how there is beauty everywhere and at all stages. For me, process is everything. It's really kind of magical. I start with a block of clay and push my thumb into it like a snowplow, creating a triangular piece. This piece grows by adding pieces. Sometimes I'll take 3 or 4 or more and combine them into a rosette. As I build, I smooth the interior areas while maintaining the texture of the exterior form. After building is complete, several rounds of scraping with hard plastic and metal ribs bring the structure to crisp completion. I have a good idea in my head, but the building process often creates opportunities for me to diverge. Edges are very important to me. They separate tough from tender, dry from luscious. I use several finishing techniques in my sculpture, but often the exterior surfaces are painted with terra sigillata. This is a solution of very fine clay particles that get applied before the clay is bisque fired. Because the solution has a different shrinkage rate than the clay body, the surface then has many fine cracks. Afterwards, these parts are rubbed with oxides, which are then partially washed away. On the interior surfaces, glazes are applied with the intention of creating the appearance of lushness and inviting touch. My pieces are fired multiple times. Why? This adds a sense of depth. Through my work, I explore my thoughts about exposure and protection, vulnerability and accessibility, and the passage of time. Both the living experience and the making of art are times of solitary reflection, which mirror each other. So thank you to all the artists who shared both their statements, their work, and their time with me. And thank you for being here and sharing your time and energy with me. And I hope this gives you an appreciation of looking at all this work and seeing it in a new way.